The Washington Commanders are playoff bound, but with multiple scenarios on the line. The question is, where will they be headed for Wild Card Weekend? Los Angeles, Tampa, or Philadelphia? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome everybody into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. You can also find me helping out with the local coverage this season for WSA9.com. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. I thank you for coming through today. If you're an everydayer, a special thank you to you for coming through every single day. And Happy New Year out there to all Commanders fans. Hopefully 2024 was good to you. I know it was good to you on the football field. Hopefully 2025 is even better. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, and you can subscribe for free if you haven't already on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's show, where we're going to talk about resting players and the Pro Bowl games. Who's getting into the Pro Bowl? I did a count of who I think has a chance to make it to the Pro Bowl, and it's a very interesting number indeed. Jayden Daniels Rookie of the Year award is imminent, in my opinion, but we're going to start it all off with talking about the Washington Commanders and their wild card travel plans, and we're going to do all of that thanks to FanDuel. New customers, you can place a $5 bet with FanDuel, and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. The Washington Commanders are playoff bound, but with multiple scenarios on the line. The question right now is, will they be headed on Wild Card Weekend to Los Angeles, to Tampa, or to Philadelphia? And where will we be for Wild Card Weekend? The Washington Commanders are going to the playoffs, but where? That is the first thing that we learned about the Washington Commanders coming out of Week 17. That, of course, is our 5 things we learned from the week before episode here this week. And Washington is number 6 right now in the NFC. So there's 7 seeds, 7 teams that get into the playoffs from each conference. You've got the 4 division champions, and then you've got the 3 wild cards. And the NFC North is going to get 2 of those wild card spots. The Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings, Green Bay Packers. A combination of 2 of those 3 teams are going to be wild cards. The other one is going to be the division champion and competing for the number 1 overall seed and all that good stuff. The Washington Commanders are that 3rd wild card coming out of the NFC East. And right now, they've got a matching record with the Green Bay Packers, who are number 7, because the Washington Commanders have a better conference record. So that they got a better performance inside the NFC, which pushes Washington 1 spot ahead of the Green Bay Packers. That means if the playoffs were to have started this weekend, they would be playing the Los Angeles Rams. So if Washington wins this weekend against the Dallas Cowboys, they will clinch that number 6 seed. And a lot of scenarios here, so try to keep track with me. And of course, thanks to the beauty of technology, if you can't keep track, you can always rewind. But I'm going to go through this a little bit slow, try to make it as clear as I possibly can. So if Washington wins this weekend against the Dallas Cowboys, they clinch number 6. Then if the Rams beat the Seahawks, no matter what else happens, the Washington Commanders will go to Los Angeles for the wild card round. Now, if the Rams lose to the Seahawks and the Buccaneers beat the Saints, then the Bucs win the NFC South, would move up to number 3 because of the Rams' loss. And that means that Washington would go to Tampa to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And honestly, to me, like there's a sexiness factor to all 3 of these matchups. Obviously, wildcard playoffs, there's automatic sexiness, right? But Los Angeles, you've got Jayden Daniels going back home. Bobby Wagner is from Los Angeles area as well, played for the Rams for a year. Tampa, Jayden Daniels' first NFL start against the Buccaneers. Jayden Daniels' first playoff start against the Buccaneers. I mean, come on. Then, of course, you have Philadelphia, and we all know the storyline with Philadelphia. So that's the scenario for the Commanders to go to Tampa. Now, if the Rams lose and the Bucs lose, then no matter what happens in the NFC South, the Rams are still going to be number 3, and Washington will go to Los Angeles. So there's no chance that the Atlanta Falcons could still win the NFC South, but there's no chance that the Washington Commanders are going to head to the Atlanta Falcons if they clinch the 6th season. So let's recap here. Commanders win plus Rams win equals a trip to Los Angeles. Commanders win plus Rams loss plus Bucs win equals a trip to Tampa. Commanders win plus Rams loss plus Bucs loss equals a trip to Los Angeles. Now, if Washington loses, if the Packers also lose, then nothing changes. So again, if the Packers and the Commanders have equal records, which they do right now, and they both lose and they'll still have equal records, the Commanders will still be number 6 and everything we just said will still be in play. If the Packers win and the Commanders lose, then Washington is number 7, and they're going to Philadelphia. That is because the Philadelphia Eagles cannot clinch the number 1 seed in the NFC. Even if the Eagles win, they will be 14-3, which they probably will, facing the New York Giants, although we expect them to rest some players. But in the NFC North, the Detroit Lions and Minnesota Vikings are both 14-2, so they've already got the 14 wins that the Eagles would then have, but each of them has 1 fewer loss, and they're playing each other. So more likely than not, one of them is going to lose. One of them is going to have 15 wins. Therefore, they'll be the number 1 seed. Even if they tie, the Detroit Lions currently have the tiebreaker, so the Detroit Lions would be. So the Philadelphia Eagles cannot be the number 1 seed. So if the Washington Commanders lose and the Packers win, Washington falls to number 7, and they would head to Philadelphia this wild card weekend. So that is the current state of the playoff picture. Again, the Atlanta Falcons are not a factor in this thing. I actually thought they were coming out of last week's win against the Atlanta Falcons. I actually thought there was a possibility that the Falcons would be able to win the division and potentially host a playoff game against Commanders. But in order for the Atlanta Falcons to win the division, the Buccaneers have got to lose, and then the Falcons would have to win. But even if the Los Angeles Rams were to lose, they would still be the 3rd seed because the Atlanta Falcons wouldn't have as good a record. Therefore, Atlanta, the best they can do is be the number 4 seed. The Washington Commanders don't have a path to be the number 5 seed, which is what they would have to be to play Atlanta. So Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Tampa, those are the options. We'll recap it one more time. Again, Commanders win plus Rams win. We're going to Los Angeles next weekend. Commanders win plus Rams loss plus Bucks win. We're going to Tampa. Commanders win plus Rams loss plus Bucks loss. We're going to Los Angeles. If Washington loses and the Packers lose, then nothing changes. All 3 of those previous scenarios are in play. If the Packers win and Washington loses, then we're headed to Philadelphia next weekend for the 2024 NFL playoffs. But the bottom line is, guys, we're going to the playoffs. We're going to go cover a playoff game. We are going to be there together because I'm going to be your friend, your eyes and ears on ground. If you can't be there physically, I'm going to be there for you, and we're going to be there together. From Jayden Daniels defying expectations to Chris Rodriguez Jr. proving that he deserves more touches. We're learning a lot of things about the Commanders here towards the end of the season, and we're going to learn even more as we get into this final game of the regular season against the Dallas Cowboys. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel, and the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a dub this regular season. I love betting on which players are going to score touchdowns, how many points each team is going to score. It's a lot of fun. It really invests you in games that you may not otherwise be invested in. I go a little bit crazy. I only bet $1 on it, but I actually go through and I pick an anytime touchdown score from every single game, and then I bet $1 on it. It's high stakes, but I don't know. It's just kind of fun for me. There's also passing yards, rushing yards, total points scored, so much more, all kinds of stuff, including placing bets on games that haven't actually started yet, like the Washington Commanders at the Dallas Cowboys, where the Commanders are favored by 4.5 points, and the over-under on the total scoring is set to 44.5. Whatever you want to bet on, just go to FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. From Jayden Daniels defying expectations to Chris Rodriguez Jr. proving he deserves more touches. We are learning about the Washington Commanders every week, and this episode is our 5 lessons learned coming out of Week 17 for the Washington Commanders. We already talked about one, that they're making the playoffs, and we have some options on where the Washington Commanders may be going for their first playoff game. If you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, all you got to do is sign up to be a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, I'm going to text you information, takes, analysis. You're going to become a part of the show. I'm going to ask you to give out game balls, make predictions, mailbag questions, which we've got coming up at the end of this episode, all those types of things. And you're going to get exclusive access to our insider-only Zoom conferences, which we try to do at least twice per week, if not twice per week, at least post games. That was actually an idea brought up by an insider. So again, insiders influencing the program itself. It's been a lot of fun. So go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider for free for the first 2 weeks. And if you like it, stick around. I appreciate you giving it a try either way. The second thing we learned about the Washington Commanders coming out of Week 17, that Jayden Daniels is the offensive rookie of the year. Not could be, not should be, not will likely be. No, he is. And even the Broncos fans now know it. Broncos fans have been holding out hope that Bo Nix would be able to make a push and challenge Jayden Daniels for that award. And look, for a little bit of time there, it actually looked like he was going to. But right now, the Broncos got to worry more about whether or not they're even going to make the playoffs versus whether or not they've got the offensive rookie of the year. And after Sunday night's win over the Falcons, Jayden Daniels now has 820 rushing yards in his rookie season, breaking Robert Griffin III's rookie record of 815 set in 2012. Now, even though RG3 did it in 15 games, it was a 16-game season, he did it in 15 games. Daniels doing it in 16 games takes the asterisk away of it being a 17-game regular season. So as far as I'm concerned, you can book it. Jayden Daniels is going to be your NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. He was plus 1,200 odds to win the award in April, meaning if you took that bet at a $100 bet, you're in line to win $1,200. You'll get $1,300 back from that bet once the award is finalized. The third thing we learned from the Washington Commanders this weekend, veteran tight end Zach Ertz is exceeding expectations. Now, I know there was a time period here where fans, media, combination of the two, a little bit frustrated with that, kind of a catch and fall type of guy, maybe showing his age a little bit, but man, has he shown up in some really big areas as this team has had to kind of find a replacement for Noah Brown, as they've tried to find a replacement for the run game that hasn't been as effective. Tight end Zach Ertz has certainly stepped up, as he has overall this entire season. Dan Quinn was asked about his preseason expectations of Zach Ertz versus what he's gotten, and Dan said, quote, I was planning on third down, red zone, some 2-minute things to go where I thought, let's start from there and see where it takes us. But I didn't have expectations past that. I thought, I know he knows how to play. The guy's been fantastic down the red zone for his entire career. I've coached against him. So I thought, let's start from there. And if that worked out, we'd expand it. And sure enough, the work that he put in during the offseason, it just expanded. And he doesn't play every snap, but he played more than I would have thought going in. And that's, I think, a real tribute to him in the work that he did to get ready, end quote. And I got to say, I've been just as impressed as Dan Quinn has been. I don't have a way of viewing snaps by downs, but Zach Ertz has played on 64.98% of the Washington Commanders offensive snaps this year, followed up by John Bates, who has been in on 45.34%, followed by the rookie Ben Sinnott, who has been in on 27.78%. And I know everybody out there, myself included, is really itching to see more Ben Sinnott. We're going to get it eventually. David Rye, the tight ends coach for the Washington Commanders, has told me on the side, like, look, Ben Sinnott, when he gets his opportunity, it's going to be a lot of fun to see. So that is coming down the pike. But right now, Zach Ertz has been a really good friend to that rookie quarterback that is wowing everybody. And going back to the preseason, going back to the offseason, going back to when Zach Ertz was signed, I told you guys this. My expectations were somewhat Logan Thomas-ish, and that's not to dog on Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas is an older tight end, had gone through some injuries, gone through a lot of punishment, and you just kind of see it in the way that he moved, the way that he ran, the speed that he ran with, all those things. So I kind of expected that out of Zach Ertz. And it didn't take long. Veteran minicamp. Very first time I saw him on the practice field, I said, man, this dude moves like he is a spring chicken. And, you know, a little bit of concern, like, okay, let's see if it holds up. All through training camp, same thing. All through the regular season, same thing. And I've seen a little bit of what Zach Ertz does post-game, post-practice, take care of his body. And it is a full-time job for that dude to make sure that he is healthy and ready for his team. But he is doing it. And, man, if he has not been impressive this season, I don't know who else could have been. So big ups to Zach Ertz out there for doing what he's been doing. Definitely been a critical part of this team. Another player who's been a critical part of the team when given the opportunity to be running back Chris Rodriguez Jr. That's the fourth thing that we learned this week, that Chris Rodriguez Jr. deserves more playing time. Now, again, Dan Quinn was asked, has Chris Rodriguez Jr. earned more playing time? And here's what Dan said. Well, let's worry about this week first. But Chris and others have really stepped into that space. And I thought the time of possession for the second half, feeling the offensive line, that was a really important thing for us and those who've been around a lot. We talked about the importance of running the ball and making some big plays. And so not getting in the one at the end, we were bummed about. But Chris has a significant role here with us, and he's aggressive. He plays square and downhill. And so sometimes between Brian Robinson Jr. and him and Jeremy McNichols, when they bring another guy in fresh and ready to fight, it's a big deal, end quote. So Dan Quinn not necessarily going as far to say, yes, Chris Rodriguez Jr. is going to get more opportunities, but Dan Quinn has talked about this entire time that he's been here that people who earn the opportunity to go out there and play are going to get the opportunity to go out there and play. And when Chris Rodriguez has gotten the opportunity, all he does is produce. Here are some of his game lines: 5 carries or more during the course of his career, 5 carries, 16 yards, a touchdown on Sunday night, 1 catch, his first career catch, by the way, for 12 yards. That's 6 touches, 28 yards, 4.7 yards per touch and a touchdown. Against the Tennessee Titans earlier this season, 13 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown, 7.5 yards per carry. Against the Giants earlier this season, 11 carries, 52 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. Against the Giants going back to week 11 of 2023, 6 carries, 43 yards, 7.17 yards per carry. Going against the Jets in week 16 of 2023, 10 carries, 58 yards, 5.8 yards per carry. And then the Rams in 2023 in week 15, 10 carries, 35 yards, 3.5 yards per carry. So Chris Rodriguez has proven when he has the opportunity to make an impact on this Washington Commanders offense, he delivers time and time again. I am not going to sit here and say that he's better than Brian Robinson or anything like that. I just think that he has definitely shown Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn that he is a guy that if they figure out a way to factor him into the game, he is a guy who can make an impact. And yes, I do expect him to get some burn against the Dallas Cowboys this weekend. How much we will get into here in just a second, because the last thing that we learned here this week for the Washington Commanders is that they're coming after the Cowboys. Dan Quinn was asked about, with playoff seeding clinched, this game not meaning a whole lot. You're either number 6 or number 7. No matter what happens, you're definitely going to the postseason. Are you going to rest your players against the Dallas Cowboys? And here's what Dan Quinn had to say. He said, quote, "We're going to go after that as hard as we can. I think the seeding portion of this is really important, and that's what we discussed as a team. We thought last night the vibe was awesome at the game. We thought we left some plays out there. And so for us, that leveling up as we're heading into this week with Dallas would be really important. But we recognize having a 6 seed and going into the playoffs with that is a good thing. And so we're going to fight like hell to keep that," end quote. Dan Quinn also mentioned in his exclusive interview with Chick Hernandez of WSA 9 that, look, if you're the 6th seed, there is a possibility of having a home playoff game down the road. If you're the 7th seed, you know you're never coming home again. I don't know how impactful that is, but it's something that definitely was on the coach's mind. And I'm glad, because it was on my mind as well. As slim a chance as it is that a number 6 seed would host an NFC championship game, it's still a possibility. And as long as it's a possibility, you want to leave that door open as much as possible. So Dan Quinn certainly intending to go after the Dallas Cowboys, looking to get that win, looking to clinch the number 6 seed without having to worry about the Green Bay Packers. Now, what he didn't say in that whole quote is whether or not the starters would play. And if they will play, whether or not they'll play the whole game. With the Commanders playoff seeding on the line, we've got your burning questions. Will Brian Robinson Jr. sit out to stay fresh for the postseason? And which Commanders are heading to the Pro Bowl this year? Let's dive into those answers coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're doing that today thanks to our friends over at Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action, and that's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more than or less than on a player's stat, like total passing yards, rushing touchdowns, and you do that, you get a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving the platform. So here's a special offer for Locked On NFL podcast listeners. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL, and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Download the app again. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly to play your first $5 lineup on Prize Picks. Run your game. With the Commanders playoff seed on the line, Dan Quinn says that they are going after the Dallas Cowboys. They want to clinch that number 6 seed. Yes, it matters, but does it matter enough that Brian Robinson Jr. and other starters will play the majority of the game? And which Commanders are heading to the Pro Bowl this year? Those are the questions that we got in the mailbag, and pretty much every insider asking the same form of question or same random topic or relative topic of conversation. Multiple insiders coming through saying specifically, do you think Brian Robinson's going to rest in this Dallas game to save him for the postseason? Do you think that the Commanders are going to rest starters? Is Jayden Daniels going to play? Is Chris Rodriguez going to start in order to get him some more experience? Basically, a collection of questions asking, are the starters going to play against Dallas? And if so, how much are they going to play against Dallas? Now, I don't expect we're going to get a solid answer from Dan Quinn on that too much until we get towards the end of the week. I think today he'll get asked that question, and I feel like he'll probably get a little bit of a general question. He might give a little bit of specifics, point to a little bit of a direction, but I think we're still going to get a little bit of generality in there. But I do think that what you're going to probably see at least is other players get more reps than maybe they usually would have, right? So guys like Jayden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson Jr., they may go out there and they may start. Zach Ertz may go out there and start. But you may see guys like Ben Sinnott. You may see KJ Osborne get more reps than usual. You may see Luke McCaffrey get more reps than usual. You may see Chris Rodriguez get more reps than usual. So I think it's going to be a combination of the two. I don't think anybody is going to flat out sit. Now, if they're injured, like I don't expect Marshawn Lattimore to play. I think Marshawn Lattimore probably could play this weekend, medically speaking, but because of what's on the line and what would be at risk, and he is dealing with that, he's not 100%, but he's 88%. I feel like a guy like that probably going to sit. We know Terry McLaurin was listed on the injury report last week with an ankle injury. If that ankle injury is anything at all right now, you might see him sit. Tyler Biadasz left the game with an ankle injury. I probably don't expect him to play this weekend. So things like that, it's making smart injury decisions versus simply resting starters. I don't know that they'll simply rest starters, but you, again, might see players get more reps than usual until it's either a wide margin of victory or a wide margin of lead, and then you might see the true blue backups come in. Or if Dallas basically all but comes out and just quits, rolls over and says, look, guys, get your win, get to the playoffs. We're just going to get to vacation mode, and everybody can get out happy and healthy. So that's kind of the way I see it going down. Again, we're talking to Dan Quinn. Today's episode is Wednesday. We're talking to him this afternoon, so he may give some more information on that. If he does, we'll make sure to include that in our crossover Thursday episode with the guys from Locked On Cowboys coming up in our next episode. And again, we got more than a few questions from insiders about the Pro Bowl, specifically which Washington Commanders are going to make the Pro Bowl. So we know that 15 Washington Commanders landed in the top 10 of their position groups in fan voting for the Pro Bowl. If you don't know that full list, or if you want to see that full list, you can go to commandergameday.com. I wrote it up for the site. I've got them all listed there, as well as where they finished in the top 10 in fan voting. But the question now is, you got the fan votes and you got the coaches, the player votes and all that stuff. Who is going to actually make the Pro Bowl this year? So I went about it and I said, I'm not going to just sit here and predict who's going to make the Pro Bowl, because that's such a convoluted process that I can't possibly tell you that with any certainty. So I basically went through the list of 15 Commanders who are top 10 in fan voting. And I said, which of these guys do I think have a realistic shot at making the Pro Bowl? Here's the list I came up with and why it's interesting. And mind you, this list is in position group alphabetical order, so don't take the order in any consideration. But center, Tyler Biadasz, second in fan voting. I think he's got a chance. Guard, Sam Cosmi, third in fan voting. Linebacker, Bobby Wagner, first in fan voting. Outside linebacker, Frankie Louvu, fourth in fan voting. Punter, Tress Way, second in fan voting. Quarterback, Jayden Daniels, first in fan voting. Special teams player, Jeremy Reeves, second in fan voting. Wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, fourth in fan voting. And those are the ranks. So fourth in fan voting, first in fan voting. That's within their position groups. That's where they ranked in fan voting. So you see here, all of these players, top 5 in fan voting in their specific position groups, which I think obviously gives them a much better chance. That's 8 total Washington Commanders that I think have a legitimate shot at making the Pro Bowl this year. Why that number is interesting. I went through the history of the Washington Commanders. I went through the history of Pro Bowlers. This franchise has not had more than 5 Pro Bowlers in a single season since 1991. You guessed it. So many things are happening this season where it's not since 1991 this, not since 1991 that, not since 1991 this other thing. This is another thing. If the Washington Commanders get 8 Pro Bowlers, it'll be the first time since 1991 that they've had that many Pro Bowlers. So if that's the case, I'm not saying to start planning the parade. I'm just saying you might want to start planning a parade. Maybe not this year, but maybe in the next couple of years or maybe next year. I don't know. And look, I texted the insiders last night as I was playing this episode, and I said, I just stumbled on a really interesting fact, because that 8 count, listen, that was not manufactured for the show. That is a legitimate 8 count that I came up with, and I did not know that 1991 was the last time they had that many. And I'm going through and I'm scrolling as I'm getting in the 90s. I'm like, oh, buddy, here we go. 1991, sure enough, 8 Pro Bowlers. So that's going to wrap up this episode of Locked On Commanders. Next up, we will have crossover Thursday, Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Commanders. Always a good time. Let's see, what are the Cowboys actually fighting for? How much of a resistance do we expect when we get to Jerry's World in Dallas next weekend, with plenty of playoff implications on the line? In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments, text me directly to do that. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and let me know what you're thinking. For your next listen, check out the all-new Locked On NFL. Tyler Rowland kicks you off in the morning with some NFL espresso, and Tony Wiggins brings you back in the afternoon for some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, every dayers. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. And until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, enjoy this new year, and I will see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.